Welcome to the Work Heartily podcast, where we grab no more than 15 minutes with Nashville founders and executives you know and admire and some you need to know and ask them one big question. I'm your host, Jonathan Barnes, coming to you live from the Work Heartily headquarters in Brentwood, Tennessee, where we help growing Nashville area businesses win through embedded fractional leadership. Today, I'm joined by Ray Guzman, CEO of Switchpoint Ventures, board member, former U.S. Army veteran who brings over 25 years of experience leading organizations through growth, innovation, and transformation. I'm so glad you're here, Ray. Are you ready for your one question?
I'm ready, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, here it is. What broke first as your companies grew, and what did you learn?
Wow, okay, it's a great question. One I get a version of pretty often, and my answer, I think, is a little non-traditional in that for me, it's something you can feel more than something you can see. And what I mean by that is the we versus me mentality. I learned that in the military, and just know that when the mission is clear, when there's alignment, when there's trust, and when the right incentives are in place, you enable your team to really focus on the thing that matters the most, as opposed to worrying about those other things. And when you get that energy and you get a team motivated, focused, and engaged, almost anything's possible. And so when I see that, and when I feel that, if you will,
Yeah.
you start to see it in the results later.
Yeah. You mentioned a good gut feel, and I think that's what leaders, a lot of leaders have. How has it come up? Maybe you don't have to give specific examples if you don't want to, but that feeling, how does it manifest itself?
Yeah.
In those early stages when you say, "Oh, something's not right here. The alignment's off," like you were mentioning.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the inverse, which is to say, when you start seeing people kicking in where maybe it's out of their domain, but they're doing it in a collaborative way, not an overpowering way. When you're seeing people coming up with their own novel kind of approaches or ideas on how to make what's happening better. So many employees are used to sort of just taking orders and doing whatever the boss kind of told them to do. And the reality is, like, as leaders, we're very imperfect. We don't have it all figured out. And so we can set the course, and then the team starts to kind of orient themselves around where we're headed and maybe make course adjustments along the way. When you're seeing people do that's when you're starting to feel and see that we above me. To answer your question, it's the opposite, right? When people are sitting around pointing fingers, when people won't take accountability or responsibility for areas that they're responsible for, and certainly when they won't kind of take the team win or loss together, when they start, hey, that's not my job. Hey, why isn't Jonathan doing that? Those sorts of things are real indicative of, we don't have the right structure, alignment, goals, et cetera.
Yeah, and I feel like that shows up not even yes, it shows up in large organizations. Maybe sometimes it happens a lot more, and the blame shifting happens in larger organizations, but it also happens in tiny startups too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
it really
how do you
does.
ensure that you have that alignment with a founding team, even when it's really small?
Yeah, a few things, right? One, first, you're completely accurate. Two, it's actually a much more painful kind of thing to deal with in a smaller organization, because you just don't have the margin for error, if you will, for that attitude or that posture. A lot of it's communication. A lot of it's predicated on trust. A lot of it's setting the example, right? So I can recall my first CEO gig. I had a little sticky note on my monitor, which happened to sort of face the door. So when somebody's walking in or out of my office, I could see this little sticky note, and it simply said, "Hey, what obstacle can I remove for you today? What blocker are you dealing with?" It was amazing. For one, as a leader, it was amazing the number of things that were, I'll say, jamming up the organization. Someone's wrestling with something that seems trivial to you, a $1,000 expense or $8,000 expense, and it's a $500,000 impact. And because somebody doesn't want to go, I don't know, over budget by $1,000, so now the incentives are there, but like that goes back to the we above me, where it's, well, I don't want to go over budget. And yet at the same time, the impact on the organization could be profound. It's like, hey, wait, let's have that conversation, right? I'll make that trade all day long. But that was an unlock for two reasons. One, it gave me an opportunity to unlock barriers and obstacles for people that I would have not otherwise known exist and would have never bubbled up to me. But number two, it was setting an example and setting a tone, because then you start seeing your direct reports asking that of their directs and their cross-functional leaders, et cetera. And if everyone's taking the posture of, hey, what are the blockers and what can we do to move those, real work starts out.
Yeah. So that question is, what obstacles do you have in front of you? and how can I help remove those for
Yeah,
you?
and some version of that. I don't remember the exact
Yeah,
wording, but some version of,
sure.
what blockers do you have in front of you, or is there an obstacle I can remove, or what are you struggling with right now? You want to struggling with is probably too broad. People start to feel like maybe they're opening themselves up to criticism. What blocker can I remove? What obstacle,
Yeah.
are you dealing with? Those are a little tighter, and people tend to respond to those. I had tremendous success doing that.
Yeah, I guess for this listeners that are listening to the podcast, a Post-it note is something that is a piece of paper,
Yeah,
and
all this gray hair is betraying us, man.
the monitor is something that used to be this big giant block on your desk that showed you screens.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think it's interesting to see, like you mentioned, if you have that as a leader that you're asking that question, the magic is when somebody else, you hear that happening in other meetings or in other correspondence where people are asking that question, and it just it frees the organization to stay focused on what the mission is and not get bogged down in the what they might think is really, really important, but for the organization, it's trivial in terms of where we're going and what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah,
That's that.
absolutely. I'll tell you where that really came from. I remember someone asked me many years ago, "Hey, okay, what's it like being a CEO? Is it what you always thought it was?" And so it was a two-part answer. It's like, one, I never wanted to be a CEO, so I never thought about it before it sort of happened to me. And then number two, but the biggest sort of surprise was we have this perception in the market and kind of in the media that when you're the CEO, everybody reports to you. And I guess
Yeah.
from an org chart perspective, that's true. But I think if you're a real leader, you realize, wait, I report to everyone in the org. And if you just take that mindset, you start
Mm.
realizing it's my job to help make sure every employee has the capability, the tools, the resources needed to do what we're asking them to do. Sometimes that includes my time, even as a CEO. And so that mindset sort of manifests in that question, which is, beyond the obvious stuff. Hey, what are you dealing with right now, Jonathan, that I can help you?
Yeah. I guess back to the original question, you think about what broke first, and you talked about, a successful outcome. Maybe you could share what unsuccessful outcome or maybe some things that were happening that you saw a path forward to insert some of this we versus me and where you saw it be successful.
Yeah. And I think this as a practical example, I could think of scenarios where maybe there's an opportunity in front of, one of the companies and there's a big pitch, for example, and maybe a material pitch where it could make a real difference in the trajectory of one of the companies. I've seen scenarios where the product team leans in, the customer team leans in, customer success team leans in, and they're all contributing in a way that's, above and beyond, I'll say, what's required, and certainly even above what's expected. And, you win those deals, right? Because you get the best folks working on the biggest things. And at the same time, I've seen scenarios where it's just like, hey, Jonathan, good luck on Monday. Let me know if you need anything. Where that like those, it seems, I get it. It's silly, right? It's like, but two or three of those go your way as an early stage company. You've got a rocket ship behind you. You know, those two or three things don't go your way. You're dealing with, needing to raise money again, a down round, a reduction in force. I mean, it's
Right.
really immaterial. You don't want to, the motivator isn't the threat of that happening, right? You don't want that to be the case. The best leader I can think of that I've ever worked for was in the military. At the end of the day, no matter what it was that he was asking us to do, the number one thing for me was I never want to let him down. He was just that good of a leader. And when you get to the point where you feel that way about your colleagues, there's what I have to do. And then, hey, what can I do to help Jonathan win? How do I make sure?
Yeah.
Because when he wins, I win. And when I win, we win. And that mindset is all the difference in the world. And in the beginning, you can feel it, but then that turns into, just using this example and pulling the thread a little bit, then that turns into the pipeline getting bigger. That turns into your close won percentage changing. That turns into more engaged, better aligned prospects, happier customers, a more informed product, faster product market fit, faster scale, and ultimately exit, right? And so
Yeah.
that alignment is everything.
Yeah, it's really a snowball effect when you start finding those, like you said, product market fit. It just is. It feels magical, but it is, just like everything else. It's slow at the very beginning, and you got to figure out exactly if you're doing the right thing. But as long as you're having that team alignment, and you've got a very clear vision of where you want to go, not that it's easy, but it definitely feels a little bit easier down the road.
Hey, one of the quote unquote Rayisms my team makes fun of is I tell people all the time, hey, what we're doing is hard enough. There's no point in making it harder than it has to be, right? And so when we can find ways to make these things easier, we have to. When you ask the question, the reason I pause is I think most people are looking for an answer that says, oh, I can measure momentum by this and, top of funnel and conversion. And it's like, yeah, I think there's something you feel before there's something you see. And eventually it'll show up in those metrics.
Yeah. I think leadership is definitely, it's an art and science. The art part of it is discernment, gut feel, etc. The science part is obviously all the KPIs and metrics that you use. It's like I think one of our mutual friends talked about the chemistry of how do you, how do you stoke the fire? What is necessary to get a fire going, and the right mix of gasoline and to kind of fuel a rocket. But it's all that kind of stuff of how do you embrace the momentum of the art and the science, put it together in a team and get it really rocking. It's like I said, it does feel very magical, but there is a lot of rigor and structure behind it once you get the team aligned.
There is, and you raise a really good point, and it sort of triggered two things. One, the gut instinct that you're talking about actually is, it's data driven. It's just you don't necessarily know all the variables. It's based on your experience, right?
Yeah.
I recall a scenario. We had a Portco where we had the CEO that we hired to lead it. I met him, hired him on the spot. He was a home run. And later, we ended up exiting that company. But right before the exit, we had a pretty large, well-known VC fund wanting us to take a ton of money from them and really rocket ship the business. And the lead partner asked me, how did you know he was the guy? And my answer was, I just knew. And he was just, he was beside himself. He couldn't believe that was my answer, because coming from the world he comes from, we needed this to, we made him take a personality test. And after that, we did and
Right.
It wasn't that. And so I saw his reaction. I said, well, wait a minute. Like, what you have to understand is gut isn't this random thing. When people talk about gut, we're really talking about kind of the accumulation of experiences and skills. And that becomes the data set that you make a quick decision on, that we're quote unquote calling gut. So that's point number one. Point number two, just to your point about systems and all that, once you have that way above me, that's not something you get going once and you leave it be. You have to continually to care and feed that kind of ethos, because as the organization grows and scales and you hire more and more people, you start to lose that again. And so you have to constantly revisit that, make sure that alignment is there.
Well, that's probably a podcast,
That's crazy.
podcast episode for the next thing about how do you continue to feed that. I will say that your guidance on a couple of projects I've been part of, and your discernment has been invaluable. So I'm so glad that you were able to be on the podcast and talk a little bit about it and share some of your knowledge and wisdom with our network here. So hey, we only have 15 minutes. That's our commitment for the podcast. So thanks for spending time with us on the Work Heartily podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation with Ray, please subscribe, share the episode with another founder or a leader. Please visit workheartily.com to learn how embedded fractional executive leadership can help your business thrive and grow. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Ray Guzman.
All right. Thank you.